years ago, Woodrow Wilson said, "What good is a political party unless it's serving a great national purpose? And what good is a private college or university unless it's serving a great national purpose?"
I've given some thought about my childhood growing up. You know, one thing about prison, it gives you an opportunity, if you take it, an opportunity to do a lot of reflecting upon your past.
You know, clear this crap on me about, well, you know, you my son, and, again, you know, I'll pay it back, and, you know, we come up with a contract.
But he does this before.
Yeah.
This is the Ambassador Hotel. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
They have an emergency. They want the police to the kitchen right away.
What kind of an emergency?
I don't know, honey. They hung up. I don't know what
We'll
happened.
find out. We don't send out
I
without...
beg your pardon?
We have to know what we're sending on.
That's all he said and hung up. It's some kind of an emergency. I don't know what happened. You know, we have the Kennedys and everybody here tonight.
You have what?
Mr. Kennedy here.
Big deal.
Hiya, fellas. This is G.I. Jill with the G.I. Jive. Yep, the old jukebox that hangs around G.I. Jive is set to operate again. And this session, I'm going to live up to my name of G.I. Jill by doing the show by the numbers. I can hear the groaning from all parts of the world. Does it make you think of good old basic training? And look, you certain PSC from APO 322, that invitation to dinner at your mom's sounds all right. And now we'd better get back to the jukebox and Glenn Miller playing Rhapsody in Blue for Jack, Abe, Blitz, Red, Roy, and Walter at APO 959.
I carry all the time, too. I figured out how to get pre-roll and chat, us talking, working at the same time.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. No single space project
on YouTube?
would be more impressive to mankind.
I'll check on that and get back to you.
But it clearly shows
I did remove it right away, though.
Involved in the 1/6 gravity of the moon.
Be careful when you tune your radios in to pay no attention to the pirate signals that sometimes...
I changed the title for extra sizzle. So that's just a title that I made up on Rumble.
The American Space Shuttle Challenger exploded.
It was a white lie.
It was launched yesterday, and all 7 crew are assumed to have died. President Reagan said the United States was in mourning, but the space program would continue.
All right, 2 minutes.
And Mr. Krupp showed some footage of a program that is on every evening in the Soviet Union for children called Good Night Little Ones. And after he showed it, he said, I guess the closest thing we have to this in the United
Apparently
States...
our audio is live. That's okay.
I don't believe that.
We're getting a little behind the scenes action.
Ever hit my father.
Okay.
And
Thanks, Frito.
Did the coroner, Thomas Noguchi, who's probably the most famous.
AK-47 of handguns.
Who did an autopsy that is known as the perfect autopsy. He actually flew in the chief coroners of all the every branch of the military service to sit in the surgery theater to watch what he did because he knew what had happened in Dallas.
Yeah.
All right, we are live. Might as well go ahead and just cut to the chase because we're already we had our pre-roll audio going, and gosh, I thought I had figured a way how to have a private conversation with the two co-hosts of Conspiracy Squad during the pre-roll, but alas, technical difficulties always seem to come out on top. Here on your favorite podcast and mine, which is a show about conspiracy theories and facts. And we have learned not to experiment with our technical setup and will no longer do so. So you get a predictable and enjoyable experience here on Conspiracy Squad. As always, thank you for the tech support in the live chat from some of our friends who are observing the show tonight. And also, as always, I am joined by two magnificent human beings, one by the name of Jasmine Starr and one by the name of Gabby McAllister. Jasmine, what is the latest on your end this evening?
Oh, nothing really exciting. I've just been really diving into tonight's topic, and
Yes.
wow,
It's a big one.
when we talk about conspiracies and everything like that, I had no idea, honestly, the depth that this topic goes into and just all that it encompasses. It's mind blowing. So I'm excited to do this episode. So
Yes, indeed. And Gabby, what's new with you?
Lots of good things. There's a production company that's actually that I think I can believe in, that wants to do both William's story and Arrow's story. So that's kind of new, and I think finally at this late date I'll get their stories done, and while William is still alive, which would be great.
So for those, for the uninitiated, Gabby is a horse lady, and among other things, now not to be confused with a cat lady because it's a completely different thing, and no negative connotations. But Gabby has a fantastic story about a horse named Arrow, which she was able to reunite with its owner after it was illegally trafficked. Is that the correct synopsis, Gabby?
Yeah, he was stolen at the age of 1. I found him beat up and broke down in Los Angeles at a rental stable. And the horse just wouldn't shut up. And I don't know of any other animal communicator who's a healer like myself who has found the original origins of a 20-year stolen missing horse. And so it is the Black Beauty version of American Mustang Black Beauty version, story by Ann Sewell. It's actually pretty much the same.
Fantastic. And, longtime viewers of the podcast know a little bit about that and some of the ups and downs that you've had with various producers over the last year or two. So prayers going up. I think you've probably found the people that you need at this point. I sense that those relationships are in place for both of these stories. Before we get into our main topic, though, there's a couple things I got to throw out there because we have to get the housekeeping out of the way. If you don't clean the house in the beginning of the day, you put it off. At least I do. So housekeeping-wise, we have a new poll, everybody. Thank you for voting on the subject matter poll for the final episode of this season, which comes up in 3 weeks. That poll is no longer online. But my goodness, did we get a lot of responses on that one. Jazz, were you surprised by any of the feedback that we got on that last poll about what our subject should be for the last episode of the season?
The last time that I looked at it, I was excited because Lynn and my topic is still in the lead. So,
wait a minute. What was your topic, Jazz?
Yeah, I want to go and MJ.
Oh, I guess. Yeah, it really is in the lead, isn't it?
Yeah,
somebody pulled that topic ahead, and it's way out front now. So anybody that's a big Michael Jackson fan, unless something big changes on that poll out there on strawpoll.com, then we will be covering Michael Jackson conspiracy theories to wrap up our season. Interestingly, though, somebody really was lobbying hard for Sasquatch, which that blows my mind because Sasquatch was at the bottom of the heap when we posted that poll 3 weeks ago. And then out of the blue, it got 40 some odd votes. So to all you Sasquatch lovers out there, it's a plausible theory and it has many, many dimensions. I think it's something that we probably should cover in the future. I tend to think of Sasquatch as being sort of like a multi-dimensional vermin or a multi-dimensional yard creature. But that's just my take on Squatch. All right. So the current poll on conspiracysquad.com, it has to do with mass casualty incidents in the United States. And this is a very sober subject that we are going to be discussing tonight. Whoever is unmuted, please mute. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's like that meme where the guy's looking around and he knows he's the one that did it.
That would be me.
Okay. She owned up.
I have too much going on here to like monitor the chat,
Yeah.
So
no, I get it. The technical
brain.
difficulties are real life. Anybody in the chat that wants to assist with live production, just go ahead and reach out to us. Nigel@conspiracysquad.com. Okay. Let's see. The current poll has to do with mass casualty incidents in the United States. There are many, many, unfortunately, examples of mass homicides that have occurred over the years. We would like to know which of those incidents you believe is most obviously an inside job. Define inside job however you want. In other words, basically to me, inside job means it's not what they're saying in the news. There's probably a more specific definition for inside job, but that's my definition of it. Kind of goes along, might be a synonym for the word cover up. And without any further ado, we have so much material to unpack on the Vegas shooting in 2017, which has just eaten up my entire week. Every spare moment that I have looking into this subject, it seems to just, the pages keep turning, and this one gets not only weirder and weirder, like, you know, we get into some of these conspiracy theories where it's like, wait a minute, what? And then you find there's all these different wrinkles and connections, and the synchronicity that occurs with some of these events and happenings is literally mind-blowing. And I'll tell you what, this one might take the cake. But go ahead to conspiracysquad.com and click Poll of the Week. Please, we need you to vote and get your opinion about which you think is the most obvious cover-up of them all. In the meantime, Jazz, your audio is breaking up there. We need you to...
I would like to put a
there you go.
disclaimer out, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
The information that we are I just want to put out like a little disclaimer that the information that we're putting out is all it's all public record. It's open source. Anybody can look this information up. So there's absolutely no reason.
All right, so we're having a little bit of audio issues with Jazz's audio.
Other than us.
Gabby, can you hear okay? Is your audio okay?
No, Jazz is like cutting out almost like she doesn't have Wi-Fi service.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the information that I have on this subject, the Vegas shooting 2017. And it all starts with a massive effort by Google to cover up the official news reporting of the event. As you know, on October 1st, 2017, at approximately 10 p.m., there began a series of events on the Las Vegas Strip at a Jason Aldean music festival concert, wherein a whole bunch of people got shot. And by a whole bunch, I mean hundreds of people. And 50, some of them, fatally. Now, these reports that we read and watched were all basically the same. They all boiled down to a number of common threads, right? The first was, it was a guy named Stephen Paddock that was shooting from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, which overlooks the concert venue from approximately 450 yards away. And from that vantage point, armed with two and a half dozen different rifles, some equipped with bump stocks, many equipped with so-called high-capacity magazines, proceeded to kill these individuals at the concert and injure many of the other individuals at the concert, resulting in widespread panic and a crazy bedlam situation in Las Vegas. The main shooting event, which was purportedly carried out by Stephen Paddock, went on for approximately 40 to 45 minutes. And then, according to the official report, it is said that Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department SWAT, after a short exchange of gunfire, broke into his room, busted down the door, and found him dead already. And this is where the official story goes absolutely sideways, because almost none of what I just described to you can be true based on open source intelligence tools that are out there in the world. And Gabby, what if I told you that after Paddock was dead, there were 15 to 20 more shootings on the Las Vegas Strip that evening, beginning right around the time he died? What would be your reaction to that?
Of course. Of course. Just, it happens with all these shootings that, they say there's only one, but there ends up being multiples.
And why do you suppose they would have had all of these other shootings begin, say, roughly around the time the main shooting event ended?
I would say, for the conspiracy's sake, that they're trying to make a bigger situation occur, or they're trying to nail people with, as being in on it. Like the FBI was saying he was a conspiracy theorist. And so, they may not have had good communication. It may have been some copycats that they put out there. I mean, there's so many pieces to this.
Well, there's a fantastic open source intelligence tool that we're going to get into in a little bit that allows people to unpack this case for themselves. And thank God for the people who put this tool together, because it's really amazing. It's called VegasShootingMap.com, and we're going to dig into that in a little bit. But before we do, Jazz, have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Zachary Voorhees?
Yes, I have.
And what do you know about Zach Voorhees?
I'll let you go with that one.
All right. That was an easy segue.
Yeah.
Zach Voorhees was the Google employee who was chiefly tasked with censoring all of the reliable news sources about the Vegas incident on the morning after the Vegas incident happened. And Zach Voorhees famously released a stolen document that he retrieved from his system at Google, which contained instructions from Google's support ticketing system, their internal support ticketing system, about problems with Google. In other words, there's this issue that somebody reported, and here's what you need to do to fix it. They send a work order to a technician. The technician goes about fixing whatever's wrong. Well, he was the technician in this case who was tasked with approving the deletion of thousands of URLs or website addresses related to the news about the Las Vegas shooting within 7 hours of the Vegas shooting happening. And people say, well, it wasn't within 7 hours. Well, it sure was, because this guy was operating on East Coast time, and the Vegas shooting was on, I believe, Pacific time. Gabby, what time zone is Vegas in? Pacific, right?
Vegas is Pacific, yes.
So there would have been a 3-hour benefit to those people who are trying to get a leg up on the East Coast news media the following morning. Consequently, when me and you and all of our friends found out about this thing, the information that was initially available to us had already been censored by Google. Thank you very much. Zach Voorhees went on to famously be known as the guy who coined the word plandemic also. And, of course, I guess he's a bit of a right-winger, at least by American standards, and he has caught a whole lot of heck because of that over the last several years. dig into that story. It's intriguing. I actually did a podcast about it 2 episodes back on Big Tech Watchdog. For anybody that's not familiar with my audio podcast, it's about censorship and big technology and stuff like that. So Zach Voorhees, critical role in misinformation about the Las Vegas shooting right off the get. But it doesn't end there. There were all kinds of creepy things related to the bungled investigation, or some would say the manipulated investigation by Las Vegas Metro, the absolutely overwhelming number of 9/11 calls that flooded into the public safety answering point in Las Vegas, especially after the main shooting event occurred. Now, Jazz, I know you used to work at a public safety answering point as a dispatcher. Mm-hmm. When you listen to some of these calls, what are your impressions? Maybe you can describe kind of some of what went down beginning at about 10 p.m. and going forward all around the Strip.
Basically, what was going on, the initial calls started coming in from the Mandalay Bay area, but they began to progress from that point on down the Strip. They had calls from the Bellagio. They had calls from Tropicana.
Yeah, the Mirage.
The Aria, New York. Several hotels were reporting shootings. People had video, and they were posting this video on social media, and their account of what was happening. Those were also being deleted by Facebook. YouTube was scrubbing everything within hours of the stuff being posted. People were just completely being suppressed. The only thing that they wanted anybody to know, any information on, was what happened at the Harvest Festival. But it goes far, far beyond that, because there were multiple shooters that were seen. Many of them actually on foot, not coming just from Mandalay Bay. People believing that there were shots being fired from, and calling 911 saying that, and there's audio in this map when you go in there saying that they were being shot at from a helicopter. So you have
even the Tropicana and the Mirage. The Mirage is 2.8 miles north of Mandalay Bay.
Right.
That is so far away that in order for these shots fired reports to have been, they could not have been. A lot of people say he was mistaking the shots for the ones that came from Mandalay Bay. Well, that's obviously horseshit. Because you can't, from 2.5 to 3 miles away, especially when you have so many intervening structures, there's no way you would think there was a gunman right there next to you.
And people have like video. They have had, there's a great documentary, Mindy Robinson. I want to give her credit for the work that she did. It's called Route 91. I highly recommend it for anybody that's interested in looking at all the different aspects. She put a tremendous amount of work into it.
Yes.
And it is absolutely mind-boggling when you see all the different angles that it comes from. And she touches on everything from the 911 calls and just the vast area alone, and where you're talking about the direction. I remember being in Vegas and staying, they had reports at Caesars, which is still further down from Bellagio, of a shooting at Caesars. I remember I was staying at the Link, and I walked to Mandalay Bay, and I was like in a pair of heels at the time. And I can tell you, I was miserable to walk from there to Mandalay Bay to have dinner.
Yeah. Well, when I was testing some of the claims, to your point, I did a Google Maps directions from Mandalay Bay to the Tropicana walking. And
Yeah.
it estimated an hour of walking.
That's correct. And I can attest to that because I've done it. So for somebody to say that they're hearing it just from that location at the festival, and it makes no sense because there were people that were shot, as far as Sundance helicopters all the way down to Caesars.
Yeah, now Sundance Helicopters, it's interesting you brought that up because that was apparently like a charter tour service or aerial photography service that was headquartered near the airport. Now, just to put this in perspective, the reason why the distance matters so much on these videos, look at the size of that airstrip, okay? That airstrip is 2.8 miles long. Okay, that's Las Vegas Airport. I forget the namesake of that airport, but that's the north-south strip. When you get into all of these 9/11 calls and shooting reports, we're talking. So that's your measuring stick. That's 2.8 miles. We'll say 2.5 miles to make easy math. The ones that were furthest away, but still very, very plentiful, almost 5 miles from the incident that the media was focusing on. And they want you to believe that all of these reports are in reference to shots fired at Mandalay Bay between 10 and 10:20 or something like that, despite the fact that the vast, vast majority of these 911 calls were actually after that time frame. And they weren't minor events. I mean, the Bellagio, there were hundreds of people holed up because of an active shooter. Same thing with the Mirage. I think the other big one was, I can't remember what the third one was. There were 3 major events completely independent of the Mandalay Bay event that didn't get any reporting in the news. Tropicana. Yes, and when people were posting links about these stories or trying to tell their stories on Twitter, all this stuff was just getting instantly nuked. So if you weren't on the ground at the Jason Aldean concert, you weren't getting any kind of love from the big tech overlords. So you were talking about helicopters, Jazz. There is a big controversial kind of discussion online about whether or not helicopters could have been used to shoot many of the people at the concert. What's your take on that? And while you give me your take, I'm going to look up the helicopter that I think you're going to mention.
Yes, the AH-64 is the one that they believe was the helicopter. But essentially what they were able to see, there's a IR footage of it, is 3 helicopters left the Sundance tours. There was a 911 report that they had a hostage situation there. So 3 helicopters left that area, and then they hovered over Mandalay Bay. They turned their transponders off 15 minutes prior to the shooting. They remained off, and then there's actual video footage along with 911 calls of people saying that they believe they were being shot at by these helicopters. These helicopters then turn and they fly back in the direction of Sundance, and then they make a turn to, I believe it's McCarran, the airport. They've changed the name since then. But the other kind of odd thing when it comes to that is there was no call sign for these.
You mean tail number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no call sign for them. And the big question is who has the ability to turn off and on their transponders at a whim, at any notice. And
Well, no civilians have that ability. We know that. So it couldn't have been Sundance.
No. And we know that it has to be a 3-letter agency then that was involved in turning those transponders on and off. And then they blacked out the runway lights at the airport.
Yeah.
Of course.
And they said it was their rationale there. So was that it would make it easier for them to catch the 2 people that were seen on foot.
Well, they
going
also
onto the airstrip.
It's interesting that you mentioned that lighting at the airport, because there was a corresponding refusal to turn the lights off at the fairgrounds where the Eldine concert was happening, even though people were pleading with the lighting operators that were a part of the concert tour to turn the lights off, because they felt that it was making it easier for them to be shot and targeted by whoever the shooter or shooters were. And there's a video, I don't think it's on YouTube anymore, but I remember watching a video where the guy just flat refused to turn the lights out. And I guess it was some kind of safety protocol or something. But so what I have on the screen now is a picture of it's the miniaturized version of the AH-64, which apparently, the MH-6 Little Bird. MH-6 Little Bird, which is related to the AH-64. The AH-64 is an Apache gunship, but the Little Bird is a very small chopper that apparently in this case was modified with a side exhaust mechanism that allowed it to be very, very silent or quiet as it was hovering around, or as these 3, I guess there were 3 of these choppers hovering around. The other difference here, the one that's pictured on the screen share that I'm showing now, is a manned version of the chopper, and you can see from these photos that it's very difficult to fit more than a couple of guys in one of these. They've been around for a long time. They use them for special ops. They have a very low radar signature and so on, and they're fast. But in the case of Vegas, the theory is that the choppers themselves, the helicopters themselves, were modified to be remotely operated. We know that technology exists and has for some time. I mean, commercial drones and consumer drones have been around since really the early 2000s.
Well, these helicopters are designed to be armed.
Yes. Yep.
There's 2 different calibers, that they're designed to actually be able to remotely, essentially like our drones would nowadays, but be armed with and be able to launch an assault.
So according
But don't
to...
we-
Yeah,
But
go
don't
ahead.
we all-
Go ahead, Gab.
Sorry, don't we all wonder, why has this been let go? This is just one example of things that people let go of. Instead of continuing to demand, they move on to the next drama,
Well, people have this fantasy about the benevolence of government. I think that's really what the main factor is. People want to believe that the farmers and herders that are in charge of the human herd actually care about them. And so why would they ever use helicopters to shoot people in Las Vegas? Why would they ever send multiple gunmen down to the Strip in order to shoot people? They would never do that because they care about us.
Well, so what has been under attack since for years now, and what are they still trying to attack today? And that's what I always look at. Why do we revisit topics like this from the past and the relevance to what's going on today? Now, they were going after the assault rifles with bump stocks. Hello, where are we at today? What are they trying to attack when it comes to our Second Amendment rights?
Well, and that was taking
talking
advantage
about
of the ignorance of people about guns, so Jazz, because bump stocks suck. They don't make the gun more accurate. They make it more prone to failure. So that aspect of it was also...
And that was demonstrated, whenever they went to do and talk about supposedly how many weapons were in room 134 at Mandalay Bay, you know, they all had essentially everything that was there had a bump stock on it.
Well, several of them did, yeah. Not all of them did, but here's the thing.
That's what I said.
If you're going to be one guy shooting up a crowd from a hotel room, what makes more sense? You take 25 guns and have them randomly strewn all around the room? Or you take a primary long-range rifle and a stack of magazines 5 feet tall. And maybe you have a backup rifle in case you have a problem with your, or get some issues with overheating or something like that.
Yeah.
The way the guns were presented in the media makes no tactical sense. And this guy was either an out of his mind idiot, which he may well have been, or the people who put the story together had no idea about guns and no idea what they were doing.
I think they knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, it's clear what they were doing. It's you know, as Gabby was saying, it's always has to do with an agenda of taking something away from us and trying to take away our constitutional rights. And they will do it at any cost. We know that. We've seen that. History has proven that to us, that they will not hold back from maiming, killing American citizens to further their political agenda or whatever agenda it may be. And I mean, you look into...
You think this was a gun grab maneuver? So psychological
Partially.
programming for gun grabbing?
I think partially. Yeah.
I think part of it was, but then you also, you know, it's like there are so many ways that you can look at this. You know, like, why did George Soros buy a whole bunch of stock in MGM?
Well, he bought put options a short time before all of this went down. And yes, that definitely raises an eyebrow, because a put option would allow him to profit by virtue of MGM stock going down.
Exactly. And what happened after this?
Well, it dropped. In fact, the stock dropped so fast the next day after the shooting.
Exactly.
That the people, the biggest owners of that stock, aka the owners of MGM, both of whom had sold millions of shares in the week prior. If this event had not happened, they would have saved $1 billion. So by selling the stock a week before this thing happened, and Soros with his put on the stock before this thing happened, allowed them to avoid $1 billion hemorrhage, which tells you without any doubt that they knew something was going to happen. And they probably knew very specifically that their hotel was going to be damaged in the process.
Well,
agreed. And then, I mean, hate to hit this sore topic, but this is always sore with a lot of people. Crisis actors. How many of these were crisis actors that their deaths were faked?
So this was my take the first time through when we did this last season, when we did this subject last season, Gab. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My take first time through was that there were a lot of crisis actors on the ground, but you're not going to put 20,000 crisis actors in front of a Grammy-winning country performer. It's just not possible. You can keep a lid on some big secrets, but that would have been the all-time. So there was a small percentage, I'm certain, of crisis actors, and I think there's a fair number of theories about a lot of the 911 calls being crisis actors. I believe there's a series of 911 calls attributed to a woman named Abigail, who is also known as the Las Vegas Whisperer. Are you familiar with that? So she's whispering the entire time as though she is afraid to reveal her location to a would-be perpetrator that is nearby on 3 separate 911 calls. And they're terrifying to listen to. But that's the kind of stuff that you get. It's very difficult to tell what is reality and what isn't when they insert some of these participants. By the way, you mentioned crisis actors. Has anybody else seen this advertisement featuring the laughing dad from Sandy Hook on their YouTube feed the last several weeks? If you don't know who the laughing dad from Sandy Hook is, it's pretty easy to figure that one out. He's now also in an advertisement trying to raise money for the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation. But the reaction videos to his original Laughing Dad content after the day after the Sandy Hook event are quite damning to that narrative as well. I'll leave it at that because I really don't want to get nuked or sued like Alex Jones. But anyway, to your point about crisis actors, Gabby, go ahead.
They've used them in all kinds of scenarios. Like there's even theories and speculation that everybody who went up in the Challenger has other jobs and is still alive.
Oh boy, here we go.
And they've had photos of that all over the place.
Yes, that one is also awesome. Jazz and I did an episode about that, Challenger doppelgangers, and we focused specifically on one of them, who was the mission. Yeah, Richard Scobie, aka Dick Scobie, who apparently is this heavy hitting consultant based somewhere in the upper Midwest, and all of a sudden,
Cows and Trees.
Yeah, Cows and Trees, Inc. As soon as his contract with whatever intelligence agency was in charge of the explosion was up, exactly 20 years after it happened, he's out back in the public doing his business thing and making all kinds of money, and he's got a LinkedIn profile. And then you come to find out later on, as you dig deeper, Gabby, to your point, that it wasn't just him. There are 6 other people on the Space Shuttle Challenger that are also apparently still alive. But I had to segue into that, but go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
it's they do it with everything. You know what I mean? It's like every single major crisis is either orchestrated, to make as much money from it as possible, or there's crisis actors. I mean, we look at, I thought forever, even as a young person watching Pearl Harbor and studying what occurred that day, to me it makes no sense. I think both sides absolutely knew what was occur, and they wanted a war, and they got their war, with Pearl Harbor. But to say that the United States didn't know that Pearl Harbor was going to happen is a load of malarkey.
Yeah, I think that's been pretty well shown over the years. There were official communique from Japan, actually, that the executive branch chose to ignore. And then, the next day, here comes Truman. Truman, FDR.
FDR. And most of the important ships were out to sea. You know what I mean? It was, if you look at it, they mitigated the damage, but they killed a lot of people. I don't think a lot of the sailors there were crisis actors, but again, I think it was orchestrated and done in order to get us into a war, which is exactly kind of 9/11-ish, if you will, from their same playbook.
Wow.
So, real quick, I'm going to jump into our playbook. Hold that thought, Jazz, because we've got a couple people on the chat that we need to say hello to. A couple new chatters. And for those that are listening on the replay on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those places, understand that we run the show live Monday nights at 7:30 Eastern on rumble.com. And quick shout out to the folks in the chat. Looks like Lynn2112 gets the honors for first. Hi, Lynn. We've got Frito. Frito heard our pre-roll audio. You're an insider. I guess I'll have to figure out how that actually works one of these days. Yukon Corey, welcome to the program. Let the truth be heard. He said, "Let the lightning of truth ring." Banned topic. Yep. And then let's see. We've got Dana Sis. Hello, Dana Sis. Eyes wide open emoji. Dean South 8, welcome back. Dean went ahead and posted the VegasShootingMap.com link, so you guys can check it out. And Lynn says she saw a UFO tonight, so that's interesting. I would like to see a picture of that, Lynn, if you happen to grab one. And
they have Pelosi on air talking about reptilians winning elections and seats in the House. So
wait, what?
Yeah, they've got Pelosi on tape, talking about the reptilians.
How did I miss this?
sleeping.
Is this new?
Yeah, it's new. She was talking about it, so I'm just sitting there and I'm like watching the video on TikTok, going, "This is just about to get crazier and crazier." So between the the UFOs and the reptilians, God knows what the hell they are. It's just, you look at our whole world, and I'm sorry, I'm beginning to think that this little section of whatever territory we're actually on is like a prison planet, and we're in a fishbowl, and everybody is just, excuse my language, mind fucked all the time with all these like things that, events that occur in order to herd the sheep a certain way.
And the problem is we have to constantly demonstrate the holes in these mind fucks so that more people can wake up. And maybe not be sheep anymore, but be rams and be awakened to the silliness and the lack of preparation that goes into some of these cover-ups. For instance, the image that I have on the screen now is a photograph that was taken of Mandalay Bay well after sunrise, the day after the event happened. And it includes 2 rooms which feature windows blown out from the inside. 3 of the 911 calls from inside Mandalay Bay were reports of an explosion on a different floor above where the caller was. And in the case of these blown out windows, the theory goes that these windows were removed by somebody with an explosive after the shooting concluded. It's also possible that to make that kind of a noise using a sledgehammer, which is what the official story says, that there was a sledgehammer employed. Either way, there's further evidence that these windows were intact at the moment that Paddock's room was breached by the SWAT team. Jazz, what do you know about that? What happened when the SWAT team came in and supposedly found this man?
Right. So there are multiple videos, body cam footage that's been released where you hear somebody giving the other officers an order to turn off their body cams. So this was going on all over the strip where they were saying, turn off your body cams. When they went to breach the room, there was a canine officer who did not turn off his body cam. And that footage is available on that map website for you to look at.
Oh, it's intriguing. Is this the one where the guy's arguing with his boss about whether or not the window was broken?
Well, I was getting to that. If you just
in
let
other
me
words,
finish.
Shut up.
I'll be over here if you need me.
So they go in, and yes, the room is essentially undisturbed. Like, the windows are intact. The alleged body is seen with a photograph of a dried blood stain next to a wet blood stain.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that up now. Just FYI, it's graphic, so I'm pulling it up on the screen for everybody. Go ahead, Jess.
Well, to maybe help with somebody who might struggle seeing something that's graphic, it's also of note that there was a report the following day by a woman who said she saw Paddock playing, I believe it was on the craps tables, and he was with 2 females. And this 2 females were also part of this whole narrative as well.
Intriguing.
A lot of stuff had been done to this room where they had been trying to access it for 18 minutes, like pre anything, with the door keys and everything like that. Doors that were opening simultaneously between 1:34 and 1:35, but yet he's supposedly in these rooms alone, so...
Yeah, you can't open 2 doors that are 25 feet apart at the same exact moment. It's impossible. Nobody has arms that long. And there were walls between the 2 doors. The other thing is, too,
there's
the
so
official
many,
story
like,
is that there
holes.
was only one person in these two rooms, and that was, according to the official story, Stephen Paddock. However, to your point about there being...
There's a room service for meals for 2 people.
Yes.
You know, there's receipts. There is video surveillance. And that's another thing that we need to bring up here. But video surveillance of them actually with their little, transport, bringing in all of these weapons into the room. But then all of a sudden, when all of this stuff goes down in all of these hotels that are all owned by MGM, none of the security footage is available. It's been requested in like a FOIA request, and it will not be released.
Of course not. And the physical evidence that they do have, any digital copies of it that have been posted, for instance, the room service waiter that waited on Stephen Paddock on the 27th of September, which is well before the date that the official story claims he checked in, but has been verified because his name was on the reservation and his room number is on the receipt, where there are 2 guests in room service, not one. Mm-hmm. So he was not by himself as early as 3 days before the shooting happened. So to your point about him being with 2 females before or after the shooting, this kind of corroborates the fact that he wasn't alone,
right?
At least not in his hotel room.
And they were reported to be Hispanic women. And interestingly, right before the shooting occurred, there are multiple reports of a Hispanic woman going to the front of the stage and telling people that they needed to exit and leave, that they were going to die.
Yeah, so at the Jason Aldean concert, there was a woman about 45 minutes before the main set who people described as seeming a little bit crazy, went and was telling everybody they needed to get the hell out of there because she felt like they were all going to die. And she was accompanied by her boyfriend. And these 2 were described variously as Latino and short. They were kicked out by the police and removed. I don't know if they were ticket holders or not, but there's literally nothing about them.
No.
Where in the hell did those people go during the news cycle? Apparently they went nowhere.
Right.
But
So you've got...
is that as we talk about this, like, I'm just enraged. I mean, obviously, we know the 3-letter agencies are as bad as the Gestapo, and have been for a long time. But
Worse,
is
probably.
anybody else enraged at the fact that police officers, like everybody but one, turned off their body cams? If I were, real law enforcement, the kind that I used to know back in the 70s, the men that I knew would have never turned off their body cams at an order like that. So obvious to hide whatever criminal activity against the people that they're doing.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, for me, like RFK came out today and said they're going to stop chemtrails. They're just going to stop these crimes. And I said, I tweeted back on Twitter, and I said, you want to do something interesting? Let all the names stand of the puppeteers who started the chemtrails and arrest every single individual involved with implementing, including these damn pilots, and then calculate all the money that went into these things that was stolen from the taxpayers, and give them back all that money, all the living relatives, as well as throwing everybody in jail that needs to be in jail for treason. And, I know I'll get the sound of crickets, but this is so much wider. Like, again, why are people not looking at law enforcement and going, I don't care if you're going to get fired. I don't care if they threaten to kill you. Stand the fuck up and let's put a stop to this nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that so-called smaller stories like the Vegas incident have traction with the everyman is because they're easier to bring people in on. Chemtrails is still a little bit I don't know. It's very spatial. It's very figurative. It's hard for most people to wrap their brains around, especially younger people who, in the last 25 years, have never seen a sky that never had chemtrails in it. Like if you were born before about 1980, you can remember a time when there was no such thing as a long cloud or a waffle in the sky or a grid in the sky. The people that are only 20, 25, and 30 years old have never lived in that world. So, for them to believe that it's a conspiracy theory is even harder. The reason the Vegas shooting resonates with skeptics is because it is so accessible. Everybody wants to go to Vegas. It's a real place. Many, many people have been there. Many, many people have seen it. And there's so many abnormalities with the story that there's almost certainly one or two things that people can latch onto and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And that's what it has in common with 9/11, in my opinion.
I think that there are more holes and more evidence to support that this was a government operation than there initially was whenever it came to 9/11. I mean, when you essentially have an entire city immediately be suppressed, the only thing they want to report is what happened at the Harvest Festival. They negate to report anything else at multiple hotels, showing like footage of two men in black running across the roof of the Tropicana. That was video surveillance and everything.
It very clearly running away, trying to get away and not be seen.
And then there's another anomaly where they use the Southwest flight. Like they use that tail number, but yet the flight path was clearly that of a helicopter. And it comes from the airport,
airplanes can't do a 90-degree turn at 100 miles an hour.
The Delano Hotel, which there are tunnels that go between the Mandalay Bay and Delano hotels.
Yep.
So anybody could have gone from Mandalay through these tunnels up to Delano, and then you have this pseudo Southwest flight that really wasn't. It ended up landing, I think it was like over an hour or something like scheduled later, like that actual, and the tail number ended up being completely different as well.
That would be a quick side note. That would be an interesting episode would be to talk about the ability of somebody out there to modify information about flights in progress, because
that's FAA.
Yeah, FAA.
There are so many agencies that like everything, and the DOJ in this case. The DOJ was corrupt. The judge that they had on the civil case for the people who were suing for this was a family member of the security in charge of MGM.
That's right. She was, I believe,
that's a conflict.
Daughter-in-law of one of the chief executives at MGM, and specifically for Mandalay Bay.
Right, and head of security. So right there, that should have excluded her immediately in a normal government justice situation from having anything to do with that case. She shouldn't have been on it to begin with. There was one man that, as soon as he found out who the judge was, took himself out of the class action suit and said no, he was not going to be a part of the class action suit because he knew what was going to happen. The people then, they began to get sued themselves for going after MGM and trying to seek, some type of restitution for whatever it may be, so from every standpoint, from who has control of all of that? Who has control?
Well, somebody clearly does, because it's the same person who has control over the media outlets that are responsible for reporting the truth. And that's why, at the end of the day, nobody should be ashamed to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, which is a derogatory intelligence term. But I don't think there's any difference really between a conspiracy theorist and a truth seeker, because we all have our normalcy bias, but our normalcy bias is simply our informed point of view. And the more normal all of this shit becomes, I fear the more normalcy bias will be built around it, and the more people will accept these kinds of things going on. And this wasn't the only major incident in 2017. The other one was the Parkland shooting in, I believe that was in Broward County. That was right after I moved to Florida when that happened. And it smelled from the get-go. That one actually smelled worse than the Vegas shooting. But the problem with that one, it was such a contained event with relatively few participants and actors that it's a lot harder to pick that one apart. The Vegas shooting, there's so much open source intelligence. There's so much law enforcement contradiction and waffling and flip-flopping and back and forthing. Like literally, the only thing we know for sure about the Vegas shooting is that Stephen Paddock wasn't the only guy. And that's based just on deductive reasoning from the information that's been provided by official sources, like the 911 calls.
He has literally no military experience. He has no training.
And no motive.
And why, and that was one of the questions that was posed. Why is an overweight 64-year-old man that has zero experience able to carry out this mass shooting from, what was it, the 32nd floor?
The 32nd floor, yeah.
Yeah. From the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay, and that it was just one shooter.
Especially when the windows weren't broken. I mean, that's the biggest problem. How the hell are you going to shoot through a window that's not open?
There were 12 separate volleys of rounds of attacks. 12 separate volleys.
Yes, full auto too, yeah.
That were counted, and they were also sent through some man that was analyzing the audio and could tell the distance, because people were reporting as they were running from that field where the concert was, and they were exiting. I believe it was, there were two main gates where there were shootings happening at ground level. The trajectory of the bullets, these people were getting shot head on, right in the forehead. It wasn't coming at an angle from up above. They were being shot from ground level. And
yeah, it's interesting that the coroner's reports are intriguing, because if you mentioned that documentarian earlier, mm-hmm. She features the coroner's reports in her film about the incident, and some of these people were shot directly from above. I mean, straight down from the top of their skull into their neck, into their thorax. That cannot happen. The only thing that could do that would be a shot fired from directly above. Either that, or they were lying down on the ground and they caught a bullet. But there were multiple of these, and I just don't think it's possible.
They were coming down straight through the top of their skull, so that they wouldn't be laying down. Right. It was a shot from above.
Well, true, but if they were laying on their stomach and they were shot from ground level, they could catch one to the top of the head. The problem is that there were so many of them like that it's okay, how many people were actually on their stomach catching one to the top of the head from ground level? Probably not that many. And so it makes the case for airborne artillery. And I do think it really makes the case for airborne drone artillery, especially considering there's a helicopter pad within a couple of miles of where the incident occurred. There's an airport within a couple of miles of where the incident occurred. There's evidence of helicopters coming and going in abnormal patterns during and after the incident, and the flight times, the times of their arrivals and their exits are incredibly curious. The fact that their tail numbers disappeared, you brought that up earlier, where they become stationary and then their call signs go away. And then the shooting happens,
Their
And then-
transponders were off, so they were essentially undetectable for a minimum of 20 minutes.
And then they all took off, and they all went north. So what happened to those 3 helicopters? There was also a very curious 911 call about a shooter on the ground at the place where those helicopters were said to have been launched from, which was the Sundance helicopter contractor right there off the strip down by the airport. So a quick jump into the chat. Jazz, would you mind taking a look at the chat and bringing up some of the best chats real quick while I talk about a couple things related to conspiracysquad.com. So everybody that would like to get email updates, please go to conspiracysquad.com and click Join Us. If you would like to find out about our poll of the week, which we didn't really promote a whole lot today, but you can go to conspiracysquad.com and click Poll of the Week to see what that looks like. And right now, we're trying to find out, in your opinion, what is the most obvious inside job mass casualty incident in U.S. history? And there's several choices up here. There's a couple that have been purposefully left off because we're not convinced that they really happened. But for that reason, you're welcome to add your own if you'd like. And as of right now, it looks like September 11th is way out front. 63.6% of you believe that September 11th is the most obvious inside job mass casualty incident in U.S. history, followed by the Las Vegas Strip incident in 2017. Jazz, how's the chat looking?
Chat's looking good. Precious Frito. Gosh, I forgot about Zach Voorhees. Been a while. Yes, absolutely. Dean South, you want a mint for a pillow. I don't think that I'd be curious to see if that mint was still on the pillow in room 134. That's for sure.
I think you'd need at least 2 mints because there were more than one person there, right?
Lynn. Right. Lynn mentions that she's seen videos of people about multiple shooters and also about the helicopters. Yukon Corey, how did this info get injected into the MSM yet is heavily censored? And that's a great question.
It's because there were real truth tellers that were trying to get the word out, but they all got stymied in the process. Zach Voorhees is evidence of that, because if you saw the list of URLs that he was required to censor from Google in order to keep his job, you would agree that there were initially a lot of people really trying to tell the truth. And if you want to get right down to it, the 9/11 calls, hundreds and hundreds of them, over 1,000 of them that night, are the original people on the street trying to tell the truth about what happened that night. Yeah. And only a subset of those have been released by the official sources. And most, if not all, of those 9/11 calls are not cited in official news reporting. Sorry, Jazz, go ahead.
He also says the Crown Prince was there as well. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I always like to...
Interesting Middle Eastern connections with the shooting event. Lots of anecdotal reports of Middle Eastern men walking around with backpacks and stuff like that.
Well, and that was the narrative that they ended up pushing the next day, was that ISIS claimed responsibility for the shooting, which...
ISIS claimed responsibility for the event 6 different times. But if you believe what I believe about ISIS and what I suspect Gabby perhaps believes about ISIS, then that's not a big surprise.
I'm just going to say it here. We fund them, so there.
We created them.
I said it. We do.
Yep.
So that's not a terrible surprise then.
So...
especially at the beginning of a new administration that was clearly anti-war the entire time.
Dean South does not want to go to Vegas. I don't blame you. I
only went once. I hated it.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed there. We've got another one here. The simple fact, all this official evidence has been suppressed and censored is clear, undeniable evidence of a corrupt government. I absolutely agree with that comment.
Who do you think is most damned by the cover up? I mean, is it the police chief there in Vegas? Is it the first responders? Is it the guys that turned off their body cams? I mean, who is it? Because the thing is, and anybody in Vegas that's watching this program right now, I know there's hundreds of you, if you were watching, would be able to correct a lot of our conceptions about what actually happened because you had actual experience that night. Who do you think bears the most responsibility for?
Every single one of them. Every single one that didn't stand up. That's the whole problem with our society in general. Like COVID would have never happened if everybody said no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the same thing applies to this. If everybody would just stand up, I mean, what are they going to do? Kill every single person in Vegas that stands up and says the truth? Kill every first responder? Kill every doctor? Kill every nurse? Kill every tower controller for the FAA? I mean, if all of them would just stand up and stop being afraid of everything, they can't kill all of you. You know what I mean? They just can't. There's too many of them.
Why kill you when they can scare you into behaving the way that they want?
But that's the thing. It's like, you know, we've been breeding more and more and more and more cowards rather than breeding people that stand up to principle.
Amen.
You know?
Yes.
So
right there.
Also in the chat, Lynn2112 said Broward County is very strange. Check out weird happenings in Broward. Interestingly, Broward County, one of the absolute most corrupt politically locales in the entirety of the United States. And people will remember that in the 2000 election, it was Broward County that finally put George W. Bush into the White House by a factor of a couple hundred votes. So definitely some high strangeness going on.
Well, the 1% finds a way to use whatever little county like this or that, but it's inevitably it goes back to this 1% that runs everything, and everybody is just a puppet, and everybody is installed.
I'm trying not
like
to be a puppet. I'd like to be more of a. Oh God, I'd like to be a little more autonomous than a puppet myself.
Well, you are an example of that, and certainly Jazz is an example of that, and certainly anybody else doing all the kind of stuff that we're talking about here, everybody who stands up every day. I mean, you know you're on a list. You know you are.
I'm on 3 or 4 lists, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're on a few lists, you know. But again, they discount people like us because, you know, we're not famous. We don't have huge followings. You know, and if you want to look at other ones like, you know, famous celebrity conspiracy theorists or truthers, I wouldn't trust them as far as you can throw them, because if they're famous, they definitely have to be controlled opposition.
And here's the problem with Alex Jones, because that guy was a famous truther regarding Sandy Hook, and they literally they sued him and got an award that is bigger than the combined net worth of any 5 countries in the third world.
Okay.
Like, absolutely unheard of. So yeah, I think fame makes you a target for sure.
So I want to go into the chat here real quick because Precious Freedom said, actually the top 5 floors, 4 Seasons Hotel within Mandalay. Look up who owned this hotel. So I just did a quick search here, and I hope, you know, because I'm doing this quickly and trying to research this, but the owner is Cascade Investment, Kingdom Holding Company, and Triples Holding. It is part of MGM. And since 2007, Bill Gates, through Cascade Investment, and Prince Al Wahid bin Talal, through Kingdom Holding Company, have been majority owners of the company.
So Bill Gates and this Arab guy.
And we had that the Crown Prince was there in the chat as well. So
since 2007, you said? Since
2007, Bill Gates, through Cascade Investment, and Prince Al Wahid bin Talal, through Kingdom Holding Company, have been majority owners of the company, and that's for the Four Seasons Hotel, which is part of MGM as well.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there were at least a couple of 9/11 calls from Four Seasons in 2017 during this incident. Seriously, everybody, go check out these 9/11 calls on VegasShootingMap.com. Now, about 1/3 of them have been removed from YouTube as of right now. So a lot of the links that are still there up on VegasShootingMap.com no longer work. And that's going to be the focus of a future episode of Big Tech Watchdog. But in the meantime, we need to thank everybody that joined us on the chat tonight. We are going to wrap things up here in just a couple minutes. But first, we have something very important to request from you. If you're watching the show right now, please click thumbs up on Rumble. We'd like to hit that algorithm. And we have been hitting it. Right now, we've got 19 of you watching. All we need is for all of you to click the thumbs up, please. If you're on your Apple TV, it's pretty easy. You just swipe up and you can hit the thumbs up. If you're on your phone, you're in the Rumble app, real easy. It just looks like a little thumbs up, just like that. And also make sure you follow all of us, because this stuff, it means a lot to us. And we want to pull the veil on a wider reality for ourselves and for the people we care about. And that means you. So, Gabby, how do people get a hold of you if they'd like to communicate?
ConnectedEnergyHealing.com.
All right. And Jazz, how do people get a hold of you?
You can find me on X at JasmineStar239, JazmineStar239. I also have the same handle on TikTok. I don't have much content up on there yet, but I am enjoying the hate from the liberals on there, so you can find me there too.
I mean, TikTok is a very blue and purple kind of haired type place, I believe, but I'm not there. But you can find me on Twitter at NigelKent239, also Instagram. Join the C Squad, and the show has a Twitter handle as well. Join the C Squad. ConspiracySquad.com. Please vote on our poll of the week. We would like to know which mass casualty incident you think was the biggest inside job, so that we can know how to steer the show going forward. Thank you to everybody that joined the chat. If you'd like an audio replay, we are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you'd prefer to download your podcast from. And in the meantime, there's only one thing more to say, and I'll leave that to Jazz.
How do we turn this thing off?
There it is. Good night, everybody.